This is going to be a look at Volume 2 of Orochi by Kazuo Umezz. I finished reading this volume the other night. I really like these hardbound perfect editions that Viz Media had put out. In the back we have a picture of Orochi here. The pointed finger, as we see in the stories later on, becomes kind of the way she activates her powers. Now, Orochi is still a pretty mysterious figure. We don't learn a whole lot about her background, although we do get to see a little bit more of her kind of powers in action. The books themselves don't come with a lot of extras. We basically get a splash page in the front. Then we have an about the author section in the back. And the about the author gives a brief overview of Umezz's kind of work in life. He started professionally drawing manga in the 50s. He is considered the most influential horror manga artist ever. His works include Cat Eye Boy, Orochi, The Drifting Classroom, Baptism, My Name is Shingo, The Left Hand of God, Right Hand of the Devil, and 14, as well as Makoto-chan and Again. The only other work of his I'm familiar with is Cat-Eyed Boy, which I have a 2-volume set. Maybe in the future I'll take a look at that. This video is going to go into some light spoiler territory. I am going to be showing off some images that are definitely not kid-friendly. Might be a little shocking. It's kind of questionable whether I should be uploading it onto YouTube, but I'm going to be showing them anyways. So this is fair warning. If you don't really like violence, then this might not be a video to watch. I really like the type. I'm not really like a type kind of nerd or text nerd, but I really like the text in this. We've got like the kind of cool little sans serifs there, and then actually not the sans serifs. I think this would be modern type. Then we have the sans serif. So Orochi by Kazuo Umezz. Volume 2 has 3 stories. We have Prodigy, Home, and Key. Of the 3, Prodigy is my favorite, and we're going to be taking a look at that one all the way up until the first major kind of twist or turn in the story. So here we have a festival scene. We have Orochi give a quick introduction. She says, "My name is Orochi. I'm following a man. The first time I saw him, he was just a cute little baby." And then we see a woman and a baby at a shrine. And she says, "Thank you for answering my prayers. The baby is such a blessing." And Orochi watches them as they leave. "I wanted to know what path the Tachibana baby would take." So we get into kind of just a quick view of the family's life, the father and mother and their newborn baby. We learn that the father is exceptionally smart. He went to a pretty famous university. It says K University, and so in this I'm assuming it's Kyoto University. But that's actually kind of a common translation thing I've seen in manga, where instead of giving a specific school name, they'll just substitute a letter for it. So the mother goes to put the baby down for a nap, but then we have her attention gets kind of grabbed, and she's a little startled. The window's open. Wait, who opened that window? As we go into the page turn here, this is actually a little creepy the first time I read it. We have a man standing in the corner, his face is obscured. He says, "Quiet." Of course, following up on the next page, he brandishes a knife. We learn that he's a thief. He's basically just robbing the house, looking for money. So the situation starts to escalate. The husband walks into the room. The baby starts to cry. The thief he's telling the woman, keep the baby quiet, shut him up. Everybody's kind of panicking. The baby starts crying even louder. Here we have another example of kind of like the Umezz face, where he draws a lot of children and women screaming. It isn't just that the mouth is like really open and expressive, but it's like almost completely black. But he also will do the two little black lines at the side there to really emphasize the kind of horrific nature of the scream. And that's a pretty well-known kind of face or motif that he's working with. And as we go into the page turn, the man actually attacks the people. He ends up stabbing the baby. And I got to this point and wait, what? This is pretty wild stuff. And the thief, he panics, runs out the door, actually runs into a policeman in his cot. And the family gathers around the baby, and they're panicking, yelling, call for help, call for help. The thief starts to cry. He says, all I wanted was money, and my son and wife are starving. The father and mother are over here above the baby. And OROCHI says, the man was telling the truth. He was poor, he had a sick wife and hungry child at home. And OROCHI thinks, I decided to keep watch over the baby Yu and his family. So kind of flash forward, we learn that the child survives the attack, but he has a really large scar on his neck. And that was probably the first real turn, real twist in the story. The story goes on for quite a bit longer. I believe it goes all the way up to about here. But again, it's probably my favorite of these stories out of the 3 in volume 2. One aspect of manga writing that I wasn't familiar with, and I had to do a little research and reading up on, was the story structure. The story structure is abbreviated Kisho Ten Ketsu. Ki being the introduction of the characters and the scenario, Sho being the development of that situation, and 10 is kind of like the twist or a major complication, and Ketsu is the resolution or ending. And a lot of manga will have that 4-act structure, but the structure itself is fairly flexible. So in this story, we get the one twist of the child being injured. Then we learn that the family moves to a different city, and the mother and father are really struggling after the event. The mother becomes extremely possessive and very demanding. She starts to pressure the boy to succeed really well in school, and the father kind of hits the bottle really hard. And so there's this kind of tension that starts to build within the family. And the rest of the story takes place centered around that dynamic. There's actually probably 3 or 4 other twists, so that by the time you finish the story, the resolution comes and it's really satisfying, definitely enjoyable. I would definitely recommend it. The other stories that we're going to take a look at, I wanted to just kind of take a look at some of the art. This was a pretty cool one. This is still the same story, but kind of towards the end. I like that we just have environment panels here. You get some really cool textures, really cool patterns. Here again, we have that kind of Umezz, like wind swoosh coming in. On to the next story. This is a pretty funny double-page spread where we kind of see OROCHI's powers being used. She's pointing her finger, taking on a group of, I guess they're hooligans. In this story, Home, OROCHI follows a man as he basically wanders back to his hometown. And he finds that the hometown itself is, something's changed about it. It's a little weird. OROCHI stops being much like a less passive character and becomes much more active. In this story, she actually squares off against another character, kind of like meets a rival or meets a match. This panel was kind of funny. Kind of took me out of the moment because I realized that this is actually just it's a background shot, but it's just a photograph where the contrast has been blown up. And same with this panel down here. And I was talking to a friend who's working on an animation project, and he kept saying, I really don't like doing backgrounds because kind of like with hands, backgrounds are also kind of like a bane of most artists. But in this approach, for whatever reason, Umezz either had this photo lying around or maybe was inspired by it, probably blew up the contrast, pasted it in, or he could have been on a time crunch as well. So when you're working on your projects, or if you're writing, there's no right or wrong way of doing things. There's ways that work and then ways that don't work. Here we see the rival in this story, Home, where it's another younger boy. He's got kind of psychic powers. And this is kind of like a Children of the Corn style story. This little boy is kind of creepy, stares at people, scares them, hurts animals. That's one writing trick Umezz uses. So if you ever want to get the reader to sympathize with a character, if they're young, have them injured by somebody, or if you want to really drive home how a character's a villain, have them either hurting an animal or attacking someone who's defenseless or hurting a child. That's a technique he uses quite a bit. On these pages, the layout is kind of old school manga style. And so instead of having 3 tiers or rows, we have 4 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Same with this page. 1, 2, 3, 4. That leaves roughly 10 on panels on this page. Roughly 10 more on this one. More modern manga typically has between 5 to 7 panels. And so even though these are denser visually, Umezz is really good at pacing. And so when I was reading, I didn't have an issue with it. I really got sucked into it. Now we don't learn much more about Orochi. Just that she does have additional powers, which seem to be some kind of use of blood magic. And when she's attracted to these people and situations, there seems to be some form of magnetism going on. Orochi will appear in a location and then, similar to Cat-Eyed Boy, kind of searches out and is attracted to and drawn to these different families, these different situations and different dramatics. One theme that comes through in this volume, which is carried through in the rest of the volumes, is not just the conflict between characters, but specifically the conflict between adults and children, where sometimes the adults are much more menacing, much more frightening than you may find in like a Western comic book or a story. I know that it is common to have villains performing like evil actions, but at the level of what Umezz provides in Orochi, there's nothing quite like it. And a little bit of the research and interviews I was watching, I did see that on a video, one commentator had posted that Umezz's writing kind of has kid logic to it. And when I was reading these stories, I could understand what they were talking about. Where there's a through line throughout the entire story, but a lot of the twists and turns, they seem childish, but because of that, they're pretty surprising. So that is Orochi Volume 2. So far, I've really enjoyed the first 2 volumes. Would definitely recommend picking this one up just to read the first story, Prodigy.